The sleek Novanite ship glided silently through Earth's atmosphere, its cloaking technology rendering it invisible to human detection systems. Inside, Commander Zyrex paced nervously, his iridescent scales shimmering in the dim light of the command center. "We have no choice," he muttered, more to himself than to his mate, Elira, who stood motionless by the ship's only window. Her gaze was fixed on the sprawling cityscape below, a tapestry of lights against the darkness of night. In Elira's arms, a small bundle stirred. Their son Talon, only a few cycles old, blinked up at them with eyes that seemed to hold the universe itself. His skin, unlike the metallic sheen of his parents', was a soft, matte gray, the mark of his affliction. "There must be another way," Elira pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's our son, Zyrex. We can't just leave him here." Zyrex's shoulders slumped. "You know the laws of Novani as well as I do. A child born with the void touch cannot remain in our society. It's too dangerous. Here, on this primitive planet, he might have a chance." Elira's grit on Talon tightened. The infant, sensing his mother's distress, began to whimper softly. "But the humans, they're so different. How will he survive?" "He must," Zyrex replied, his tone final. "For his sake, and for the sake of our people." With heavy hearts, they descended to the outskirts of the city. They chose a quiet street, lined with modest houses and well-tended gardens. At the steps of one such house, Elira gently placed the bundle containing their son. Talon's eyes were wide now, taking in the alien world around him. "Be strong, my little one," Elira whispered, pressing a final kiss to his forehead. "May the stars watch over you." Zyrex placed a small device next to the child. It would send out a signal, drawing the humans to this spot. With a last, lingering look at their son, the Novanite couple retreated to their ship. As they ascended into the night sky, leaving Earth and Talon behind, neither Zyrex nor Elira could have imagined the chain of events they had set in motion. They couldn't have known that their son, left alone on a strange world, would become the catalyst for a change that would reshape the relationship between their two species forever. On the quiet street below, Talon lay silent, his unusual eyes reflecting the stars above. The device beside him beat softly, its signals spreading out into the night, and in a nearby house, a light flickered on. Nico Salvatore, known in certain circles as the Ghost, was not a man accustomed to surprises. As the head of one of the city's most feared criminal organizations, he prided himself on always being 2 steps ahead of everyone else. But nothing in his years of experience had prepared him for the sight that greeted him when he opened his front door that night. The soft beeping had roused him from a fitful sleep, a remnant of paranoia from years spent watching his back. Expecting a threat, he found instead a child unlike any he had ever seen. Nico crouched down, his weathered face creasing in confusion. The infant's skin was an odd, matte gray, and its eyes. Nico found himself unable to look away from those eyes, which seemed to swirl with galaxies. "What the hell?" he muttered, reaching out a hesitant hand. The child didn't cry or flinch away. Instead, a tiny gray hand reached up, grasping Nico's finger with surprising strength. In that moment, something shifted in Nico Salvatore's world. He had never been one for sentimentality, had never wanted the burden of a family. But as he looked into those impossible eyes, he felt a connection he couldn't explain. Without fully understanding why, Nico scooped up the child and the strange beeping device. He cast a wary glance up and down the street before retreating into his house, closing the door on the world outside. "Looks like it's you and me, kid," he said softly, cradling the infant awkwardly in his arms. "Don't know what you are or where you came from, but I guess we'll figure it out together." As dawn broke over the city, casting long shadows across Nico's living room, the hardened criminal found himself doing something he never thought he'd do, preparing a makeshift bed for a baby. An alien baby, if his eyes weren't deceiving him. "I must be losing my mind," he muttered, even as he gently laid the child down. The infant, Nico had started thinking of him as Gray for lack of a better name, gurgled contentedly. Nico ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, mind racing. He knew he should turn the kid over to the authorities, or at least to someone better equipped to handle a baby. But something held him back. The same instinct that had kept him alive in the cutthroat world of organized crime now told him that this child was special, that keeping him safe was somehow crucial. "All right, Gray," he said, settling into a chair next to the makeshift crib. "I don't know the first thing about taking care of kids, let alone whatever you are, but I'm gonna try. God help us both." As the sun rose higher, bathing the room in warm light, Nico Salvatore, feared criminal, ruthless businessman, and now improbable guardian, watched over the sleeping alien child. Neither of them could have known it then, but this unlikely pair would go on to change the course of human history, bridging the gap between two worlds and challenging the very notions of family, belonging, and what it means to be human. Years passed, and Gray grew from an enigmatic infant into a curious, intelligent child. Nico Salvatore, once known only for his ruthlessness in the criminal underworld, found himself transformed by the responsibility of raising this extraordinary boy. Gray's alien nature became more pronounced as he aged. His skin retained its matte gray hue, and his eyes continued to swirl with what looked like distant galaxies. But it was his mind that truly set him apart. By the age of 5, Gray had mastered several languages, could solve complex mathematical equations in his head, and displayed an uncanny ability to understand and manipulate technology. Nico did his best to keep Gray's existence a secret, knowing that the boy's unique abilities would make him a target for both the government and rival criminal organizations. He converted the basement of his sprawling mansion into a high-tech learning center for Gray, filled with computers, books, and salvaged alien technology that Nico had managed to acquire through his underworld connections. One evening, as Nico returned home from a particularly tense meeting with rival gang leaders, he found Gray sitting cross-legged in the middle of the basement, surrounded by floating holographic displays. "Hey, kid," Nico said, trying to hide his amazement. "What you got there?" Gray looked up, his galaxy eyes twinkling with excitement. "Papa, I think I figured out how to decode the signal from the device you found me with." Nico felt a chill run down his spine. They had spent years trying to understand the alien technology, but it had always been beyond their grasp. "Show me," he said, pulling up a chair. With a wave of his hand, Gray manipulated the holographic displays, bringing up a series of complex symbols and equations. "See, it's not just a signal," he explained, his young voice filled with enthusiasm. "It's a map, Papa. A map of the stars." As Gray continued his explanation, Nico found himself struggling to keep up. The boy's intellect had long since surpassed his own, but this was something else entirely. Gray wasn't just decoding the signal, he was unraveling the secrets of interstellar travel. "Gray," Nico interrupted, his voice serious. "You understand that this information, it's dangerous, right? There are people out there who would do anything to get their hands on this." Gray nodded solemnly. "I know, Papa. That's why I haven't told anyone else. But don't you think this could help people? Maybe even help me find out where I came from?" Nico sighed, running a hand through his now fully gray hair. He had always known this day would come, the day when Gray's origins would become more than just a mystery, but a quest. "Listen, kid," he said, choosing his words carefully. "You're special, not just because of where you came from, but because of who you are. And yeah, maybe this information could help a lot of people, but it could also hurt a lot of people if it falls into the wrong hands." Gray's brow furrowed, his galaxy eyes swirling with concern. "So what do we do?" Nico stood up, pacing the room as he thought. His old instincts, honed by years in the criminal world, were screaming at him to destroy the information, to keep Gray hidden away from the world. But he knew that wasn't fair to the boy, nor to the potential good that could come from this discovery. "We need to be smart about this," he finally said. "We can't just go public with it, but maybe we can find some people we trust. Scientists maybe. People who can help us understand what this all means without putting you in danger. Gray's face lit up with a smile. Really? You mean I might get to meet other scientists? Nico couldn't help but chuckle at the boy's enthusiasm. Yeah, kid, but we're gonna be real careful about it, okay? Nobody knows about you or this information until I say so. As they continued to discuss their plans, neither Nico nor Gray noticed the small, drone-like device hovering outside the basement window. Its camera focused on the holographic displays, transmitting data to a ship far above the Earth's atmosphere. On board that ship, Commander Zirex watched the feed with a mixture of awe and trepidation. It's him, he whispered to his mate, Elira. Our son, he's alive, and he's unlocked the void touch. Elira's eyes filled with tears as she gazed at the image of the son they had abandoned years ago. We have to go back for him, she said, her voice filled with determination. Zyrex nodded grimly. Yes, but we won't be the only ones. If he's truly unlocked the secrets of void travel, every power in the galaxy will be after him. He turned to his communication officer. Set a course for Earth, and send word to the High Council. Tell them we found the key to the universe. As the Novanite ship changed course, hurtling towards Earth, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. And at the center of it all was a young boy with galaxy eyes, unaware of the storm that was about to break upon him and the man who had become his father. As Gray entered his teenage years, the delicate balance of secrecy that Nico had maintained began to strain under the weight of the boy's growing powers and curiosity. Now 15, Gray's ability to manipulate energy and matter had progressed far beyond simple holograms. He could now create small wormholes, manipulate gravity, and even influence the thoughts of those around him, though this last ability filled him with a deep sense of unease. One crisp autumn morning, Nico found Gray in the basement, his hands outstretched as he effortlessly levitated several heavy pieces of equipment. You're getting stronger, Nico observed, a mix of pride and concern in his voice. Gray gently lowered the equipment, turning to face his adoptive father. His galaxy eyes swirled with excitement and a hint of frustration. Papa, I've been thinking. I can't stay hidden forever. There's so much I could do, so many people I could help. Nico sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. I know, kid, but you got to understand, the world out there. It's not ready for someone like you. They might fear you, try to control you. Or they might accept me, Gray countered. How will we know if we don't try? Their debate was interrupted by the sudden blaring of alarms. Nico's eyes widened in shock. These were his most secure systems, designed to alert them of any extraterrestrial activity near Earth. What's happening? Gray asked, his voice trembling slightly. Nico rushed to the main computer console, his fingers flying over the keys. We've got multiple bogies entering Earth's atmosphere, and they're heading straight for us. Gray's face paled, the swirls in his eyes spinning faster. It's them, isn't it? The ones who left me here. Before Nico could respond, the basement wall exploded inward. Through the dust and debris stepped a figure that looked like an older, metallic version of Gray. Behind him, several armed Novanite soldiers filed in, their weapons trained on Nico and Gray. Hello, son, the figure said, his voice a mix of warmth and authority. I am Commander Zirex of the Novanite Empire, and I've come to take you home. Gray instinctively stepped in front of Nico, his hands raised defensively. I am home, he said firmly, and this man is my father. Zyrex's eyes narrowed. I see the primitive has filled your head with lies. You are Talon, heir to the Novanite throne, and possessor of the void touch. Your place is with your people. Nico, recovering from the shock of the invasion, placed a hand on Gray's shoulder. Listen, Commander, he said, his voice steady despite the guns pointed at him. I don't know what your deal is, but the kid stays here if that's what he wants. Zyrex's face hardened. This is not a negotiation, human. The boy comes with us, willingly or not. His powers are too dangerous to be left unchecked on a primitive world like this. Gray's eyes blazed, the galaxies within them seemed to churn with anger. I'm not going anywhere, he declared, and I won't let you hurt my father. With a wave of his hand, Gray created a shimmering energy barrier between them and the Nova Knights. Zurek's eyes widened in surprise and a hint of fear. You see, he said, his voice urgent, you can't control your powers. You need proper training, guidance that only we can provide. Gray shook his head. No, what I need is right here. The love and support of a real father, not someone who abandoned me because I was different. Zyrex flinched at the accusation. We had no choice. The laws of our people are wrong, Gray interrupted. And if you try to force me to go with you, you'll see just how much control I have over my powers. To emphasize his point, Gray caused several small wormholes to open around the room, their edges crackling with energy. The Nova Knight soldiers stepped back, clearly unnerved. Nico, seeing an opportunity, spoke up. Look, Commander, why don't we all take a step back and talk about this like civilized beings? There's got to be a way to work this out without anyone getting hurt. Zyrex hesitated, his eyes darting between Gray's determined face and the wormholes surrounding them. Finally, he raised a hand, signaling his soldiers to lower their weapons. Very well, he said, his voice tight. We will talk. But know this, Talon Gray. The fate of entire worlds may rest on the decision you make today. As the tension in the room slowly ebbed, Gray exchanged a worried glance with Nico. They had both known this day might come, but neither had truly been prepared for the reality of it. Now, with the truth of Gray's origins finally revealed, they faced a challenge that would test the bonds of their unusual family and potentially change the course of two civilizations forever. The tense standoff in Nico's basement had evolved into an uneasy truce. Commander Zyrex and a small contingent of Nova Knights had been reluctantly allowed to stay, setting up a temporary base in Nico's spacious living room. The atmosphere was thick with suspicion and barely contained hostility. Gray sat between Nico and Zyrex, his galaxy eyes darting between the two men who each claimed to be his father. The boy's mind raced, trying to process the revelation of his true heritage while grappling with his growing powers. You must understand, Zyrex was saying, his metallic skin glinting in the soft light, your abilities, the void touch, they're not just a gift. They're a responsibility. In the wrong hands, they could tear the fabric of space-time apart. Nico scoffed, his hand protectively on Gray's shoulder. And I suppose you think your hands are the right ones. The same hands that abandoned him on our doorstep. Zyrex's eyes flashed with a mixture of guilt and anger. We did what we thought was best at the time. Our laws. Your laws are wrong, Gray interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. You left me because I was different. Papa Nico took me in for the same reason. A tense silence fell over the room. It was broken by a sudden, urgent beeping from one of the Nova Knight devices. A young officer rushed over, her face paling as she read the display. Commander, she said, her voice trembling, we've detected multiple ships entering the solar system. They're voidborn, sir. Zyrex stood abruptly, his face a mask of terror. Impossible. They couldn't have followed us here. Who are the voidborn? Nico demanded, standing as well. Zyrex turned to them, his eyes grave. They are the reason we feared the void touch. Beings from another dimension who seek to use its power to break through to our reality. If they found us, found him, he nodded towards Gray, then your entire world is in danger. Gray felt a chill run down his spine. What can we do? Zyrex's expression softened slightly as he looked at his son. We fight. But we'll need your help, tall Gray. Your powers may be our only chance. Nico stepped forward, his face set in determination. If you think I'm letting you take him into battle, you've got another thing coming. Papa, Gray said softly, placing a hand on Nico's arm. I have to help. This is my home too. As they argued, the Nova Knight equipment began blaring with more alarms. Outside, the sky darkened unnaturally, swirling vortexes of energy tearing open in the atmosphere. They're here, Zyrex breathed. Suddenly, The front wall of Nico's house exploded inward. Through the debris stepped a figure that seemed to defy description, a shifting mass of darkness and light, vaguely humanoid but constantly changing. The child of two worlds, the figure's voice reverberated, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "We have come for you." Gray stood, his eyes blazing with determination. "I won't let you hurt anyone," he declared, raising his hands. The air around them crackled with energy as Gray's powers surged. Nico and Zyrex exchanged a glance, a moment of understanding passing between them. Whatever their differences, they both cared for Gray and would do anything to protect him. "We stand with you, son," they said in unison. As the Voidborn advanced, Gray unleashed his powers, creating a swirling vortex of his own. The two forces clashed, reality itself seeming to warp and bend around them. In that moment, as human, Novanite, and Voidborn faced off, the fate of not just Earth, but the entire universe hung in the balance. And at the center of it all stood Gray, a boy torn between two worlds, wielding powers he was only beginning to understand. The battle for Earth, and for Gray's future, had begun. The suburban neighborhood that had been Nico's quiet refuge for years now resembled a war zone. Voidborn creatures poured from the swirling portals in the sky, their amorphous forms twisting and reshaping as they engaged the Novanite forces. Amid the chaos, Gray stood at the epicenter, his hands outstretched as he manipulated the fabric of reality itself. Nico, armed with a Novanite energy weapon, fought side by side with Zyrex. Despite their differences, the two fathers had formed an unspoken alliance, their shared goal of protecting Gray overriding any lingering animosity. "We need to close those portals," Zyrex shouted over the din of battle, his metallic skin reflecting the flashes of energy weapons and Gray's swirling power. Gray nodded, his galaxy eyes blazing with determination. He reached out with his mind, feeling the edges of the rifts in space-time. With a grunt of effort, he began to pull them closed, one by one. The Voidborn leader, a shifting mass of darkness and light, advanced on Gray. "You cannot deny your true nature, child of two worlds," it intoned, its voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "You belong to the void, as we do." "I belong to myself," Gray retorted, his voice strong despite the strain evident on his face. He pushed back against the Voidborn's assault, creating a barrier of swirling energy between them. Nico, seeing Gray's struggle, fought his way to his son's side. "You've got this, kid," he encouraged, placing a hand on Gray's shoulder. "Remember everything we've been through. You're stronger than they are." Zyrex joined them, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pride. "Your human father is right," he admitted. "You have a strength we never imagined possible." Drawing strength from both his fathers, Gray's power surged. The swirling energies around him intensified, pushing back against the Voidborn forces. One by one, the invaders were forced back through the portals they had created. But the Voidborn leader remained, its form growing larger and more menacing. "If we cannot have you," it growled, "then we will destroy this world and all others that stand in our way." The creature began to expand, its form encompassing the sky above them. Reality itself seemed to warp and twist around it, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of their world. Gray stood firm, his hands raised against the onslaught. "No," he said simply, his voice resonating with power. "This ends now." With a tremendous effort, Gray reached out with his mind, not just to close the portals, but to reshape them. He created a massive vortex, one that began to pull the Voidborn back to their own dimension. The leader of the Voidborn howled in rage and fear as it was drawn into the swirling mass. "This is not over, child of two worlds," it threatened as it was pulled away. "We will return." Gray maintained his concentration, sweat beading on his forehead as he guided the last of the Voidborn through the portal. With a final push of his power, he sealed it shut, the sky above returning to its normal, peaceful blue. As the dust settled, Gray collapsed to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. Nico and Zyrex rushed to his side, supporting him between them. You did it, son, Nico said, his voice thick with emotion. Zyrex nodded in agreement. You've saved not just this world, but countless others. Gray looked up at both of them, a weary smile on his face. We did it, he corrected, all of us together. As the three of them embraced, human, Novanite, and something altogether new, they knew that this was just the beginning. The threat of the Voidborn had been averted for now, but Gray's existence, and his incredible powers, had changed everything. The world would never be the same, and neither would their unusual family. In the days following the Voidborn invasion, an uneasy calm settled over Earth. The world governments, now aware of the existence of both the Novanites and the threat from beyond, scrambled to come to terms with this new reality. At the center of it all was Gray, the boy with galaxy eyes who had saved the planet. Nico's once quiet home had become a hub of activity. Human scientists, government officials, and Novanite delegates streamed in and out, all seeking audience with Gray. Through it all, Nico and Zyrex remained constant presences at the boy's side, their shared concern for his well-being bridging the gap between their two species. On a quiet evening, as the sun set over the scarred landscape of their neighborhood, Gray found himself sitting between his two fathers on the porch steps. So, he said, breaking the contemplative silence, what happens now? Nico chuckled, running a hand through his silver hair. That's the million-dollar question, kid. Zyrex nodded, his metallic skin glinting in the fading light. Indeed, the High Council is conflicted. Your existence challenges everything we thought we knew about the Void Touch. Gray's brow furrowed, the galaxies in his eyes swirling slowly. And what about Earth? Will your people try to take over now that they know about us? Not if I have anything to say about it, Zyrex said firmly. I've seen the strength of humanity firsthand. Any attempt at conquest would be unwise. Nico raised an eyebrow at the Novanite commander. Never thought I'd hear you say that. Yes, well, Zyrex replied, a hint of a smile on his face. Recent events have been quite enlightening. Gray looked between them, a warmth spreading in his chest. You know, he said softly, I used to dream about finding my birth parents. I imagined all sorts of scenarios, but I never imagined this. Nico put an arm around Gray's shoulders. Life's funny that way, kid. Throws you curveballs you never see coming. Zyrex nodded in agreement. Indeed, I must admit, when we left you here, I never imagined you would find such a capable guardian. He inclined his head towards Nico, a gesture of respect. So where do we go from here? Gray asked, his voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. Nico and Zyrex exchanged a glance over Gray's head, a moment of understanding passing between them. Well, Nico started, I was thinking, maybe it's time we showed you more of the world. Both worlds, actually. Zyrex nodded. Yes, you have a unique perspective, Gray. One that could bridge the gap between our species. Perhaps you could be an ambassador of sorts. Gray's eyes widened, the galaxies within them spinning faster. You mean, travel between Earth and Novani? Help our peoples understand each other? If that's what you want, Nico said. No pressure, kid. It's your life, your choice. Gray stood up, looking out over the neighborhood that had been his home for so long. In the distance, he could see the shimmering outline of a Novanite ship, a reminder of the vast universe that awaited him. I want to help, he said firmly. I want to make sure what happened with the Voidborn never happens again, and I want to show both our peoples that we're stronger together than apart. Nico and Zyrex stood as well, flanking Gray on either side. Then that's what we'll do, Nico said, pride evident in his voice. Zyrex placed a hand on Gray's shoulder. Together, he agreed. As the three of them stood there, silhouetted against the setting sun, they knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and likely more threats to face. But they would face them as a family, a unique, unprecedented family that represented the best of both worlds. Gray, the child of two worlds with the power to shape reality itself, looked to the future with hope and determination. He had found his place, not just on Earth or Novani, but in the vast, interconnected tapestry of the universe. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, their light reflected in Gray's galaxy eyes, a new chapter in the history of both humanity and the Novanites began to unfold.